Domestic violence isn't a problem out there, it's a problem in here.
What is intimate partner violence and what do you do if you're a victim? I am joined today by retired Deputy Commissioner with the New York City Human Resources Administration to answer all these questions. And let's take it away and say hello to Marie Braithwaite Phillip. Marie, welcome to M.E.S.H.
Good day, Pamela, and I am happy to be here.
Marie, let's sort of start with the beginning. What exactly is intimate partner violence? What does that look like? What are the behaviors?
So, intimate partner violence or domestic violence is a relationship between people who are involved intimately or familially, and in which one person is using force to gain control or maintain control over another. And force, there are some key factors here. Relationship is one. The individuals are trusted to each other. That's a key factor. And the other is force is can be a set or pattern of behaviors that include physical force, use of a weapon, psychological, emotional, sexual. That it's a pattern of behaviors designed to control the behavior of another.
Now, Marie, you were responsible for domestic violence programming
Mhm.
and for policy development and administration. I think I have the description
Mhm.
appropriately in New York City, overseeing many people and many organizations. That really sounds like a lot.
It is a lot. I will note here, though, that I've been involved in domestic violence as a movement back in the 80s. So one of the I would feel assets of the work for me was that being involved at that level, from community organizing to the point in which I worked at HRA, gave me a real long range view in the process. So we went from community organizing, being able to work with individuals and families in setting up safe spaces, to actually professionalizing a movement, developing shelters and developing community programs that were really advancing in reaching individuals to help them understand what domestic violence is and what the resources are to get help.
And clearly, part of your work was dealing with emergencies when they showed up. And in the world of domestic violence, I would say emergencies show up every day, all day long.
Emergencies definitely show up every day, all day long. We know that statistics show that 1 in 4 individuals experience domestic violence in their lifetime, and
Right.
that it's a lifespan issue. It is not one that just happens with younger adults. It happens. Child abuse is domestic violence,
Oh.
and abuse of older adults, including elder abuse, is also a form of domestic violence.
Well, let's focus on elder abuse because perhaps, and this is my thought. I'd like to hear your view. My sense is that we don't really think about elder abuse as much as it perhaps happened, and if we do, not really sure what it is. How often is elder abuse an issue? Do you have a sense? Is it a deal?
That's a good question, Pamela, because one of the factors in elder abuse is that it's very much underreported.
Oh,
I also need to say here that elder abuse, though it's a form of domestic violence, it has different characteristics and is much more focused on the victims in this case being dependent on care, either as elderly or as disabled. So the abuse often is taking place with a family member or a caregiver or within an institution in which the individuals are either being physically abused or denied care, neglected. And often elder abuse involves financial exploitation as well.
you say financial exploitation, and I recall a time when I was at a bank, and I just saw it looked like maybe a mother, I'm not sure, and in an adult son who was
Mhm.
really going after her about what to do with her money, and I could almost see her shrink you
Mm,
know, in her chair.
yeah.
And, I went to another member of the banking staff and said, maybe you guys ought to take a look at this. And I'm grateful that they did. I don't know what happened, but how often do people do that? How often do people say, I think I see something going on. Can you take a look?
I can't say how often people will share the observation, but what I can say is that within the area of elder abuse, policies have been developed and put in practice in terms of this, just that type of situation. So banks now are much more accountable and will initiate steps if
Wonderful.
one of the bankers feels that something doesn't feel right here, or I'm not trusting this. There are steps they can take to really look at what's going on, maybe close an account or ask questions or demand paperwork to show who has power of attorney or who
Okay.
has responsibility in the situation. So
Okay.
that's a real advance in elder abuse. However, I will say that domestic violence in older adults doesn't just look like elder abuse. We're also talking about domestic violence between people who have been in long term relationships,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
in which, as the care demands get increase in those relationships, strain can come about there, or just changes in retirement, lifestyle,
Sure.
etc.,
Sure.
that can often be involved with older adults in domestic violence situations. So it's a bit different. And in terms of what people can do, the options change at that point also.
What should one look at? I'm a family member. I'm not a professional. I have no idea. First of all, I don't even know what constitutes elder. Um,
Mhm.
some people say 30 plus is elder. I don't know. So what legally is there a legal definition of what constitutes elder in terms of abuse? And then what am I looking for? How do I know what I'm seeing?
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there are elder abuse is defined, particularly like CDC, specifically around people who are dependent on care.
Okay.
And what I was noting before in terms of domestic violence with older adults in general, that's a bit different. And it also changes some of the options that individuals may have. So, in elder abuse, there is Adult Protective Services, which is a state run by the state throughout um, run by the state in your state, but it's throughout the nation. There are adult protective services units
Okay.
that can provide services, resources for people in their particular areas. But those cases are very specific, and there's a high standard in terms of those cases that has to be met for a case to be opened. You may have issues in terms of guardianship. They can be very serious cases.
Okay.
In domestic violence cases where it's going on in the home, and people may not know, and for older adults, which is being defined as 60 plus,
Okay.
won't pass any judgment there, but we know that people are living longer. So we're aware that this is going on more. However, it's also repressed in terms of older individuals' uh, standards about talking about things outside the home.
Absolutely.
Shame is a big factor here, not wanting people in your business, and also what their actual outcomes might be. Going into a shelter at 65 or 70, having to give up resources, family supports, is a very hard call.
Absolutely. And folks, by now, I'm guessing that you've just learned something new. I'm guessing that you just heard about something that you want to know more about. And so I'm going to take just a second to invite you to follow, subscribe, and share Mesh with someone you care about. Let's go back to the conversation with Marie. Marie, we've talked about what legally the age range is to look at in terms of what constitutes elder. So, what do I do? I think something is happening in the home, but I don't. Maybe it's my friend. I've gone to visit my friend, and I think
Mhm.
something's a little wonky happening with my friend. What am I looking for? What do I do? How do I think about this?
Well, what you're looking for, I think, really has to be about having a conversation with your friend
Okay.
alone, just the two of you, and ensuring that that conversation happens in a safe space. So if you have some questions, some like moments. I would not have that conversation in front of others. I would definitely make sure that you're in a safe space and you can ask the questions that you want to ask. Being non judgmental is very, very important to understanding that often folks already feel very ashamed about what's going on, may not trust telling anyone. So being clear that whatever's going on and how and what you're there for as a friend to support is important for them to know, and that when they do share, that it's important to say the abuse, the behavior of the abuse is not the responsibility of the victim. It is a responsibility of
So
the abusive
so
individual.
important.
So being supportive as you can, talking about what safety would look like, because maybe leaving the situation is not what can be done in that at that point. So what would safety look like? Signals that the two of you can use
Uh,
if more help is needed. Having your important papers in a place that you can access them quickly,
gotcha.
even if it's just for a quick getaway or for your friend to come stay with you for a few days. But
You
really
know,
talking about a plan.
I'm thinking about a go bag, right? So you wanna be ready to
Correct.
go.
Mhm.
Um,
But let me interrupt here and say a go bag, yes, is important, but you also want to be safe. You want to make sure that this is not something that the abusive individual could find,
ah,
and that now escalates the issues. So you want it's like maybe just collect the paperwork first, having or putting your really intimate things, important things in a Ziploc so you can grab them as opposed to a suitcase or a overnight bag, which may be more suspicious.
gotcha. And the other thing I think about is if the person, if your friend is mobility impaired,
Correct.
how do you actually get that safe space? And maybe perhaps a clue that something might be going on is if you're not able to have quiet, independent space with your friend without the caregiver being present. I would think that would be a real red flag.
Yes, it is. Isolation is a key factor in domestic violence, and also being clear. And this conversation is so central to people understanding some of the dynamics and being able to share them with others. It's not education and awareness is a key factor in domestic violence. Each one, reach one, teach one. Really important. But isolation often starts early on in the process. I used to say this often, if we, particularly in DV, in general, intimate partner violence, if you were threatened or abused on your first interaction with this person, you most likely wouldn't be in the relationship. It doesn't just start from it starts from the beginning, but in very discrete ways. And it builds. And the longer the time in the relationship, the greater the trust, the more the person is in. So that's often why it's not about why they didn't leave. It's about what's helping them to stay. And it could be financial dependence as well, children, etc.
So it's really complicated. Marie, where can people go to get additional information, or reach out?
Well, there are certainly a number of places online, but one of the resources I can give you is definitely the National Domestic Violence Helpline, which is a phone call, and you can gain access to resources through them, just or even just information. And there are many sites online that you can go to. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence online, if you go on, they also have a cyber safety feature in the online resources, which will make sure that if you're using a shared computer, that it won't be tracked back. So you can, click on the link for that and make sure that the computer doesn't show you've been looking at these resources, if that's the type of situation you're in.
And you're using a term that I'm going to guess a lot of people haven't heard before, a cyber safety ability to
Yes.
get out quickly and to not be tracked. So, so important, particularly if you are dependent upon the person that you're living with, or the caretaker. Marie,
Mhm.
I know we've just touched the very beginning of all that this complicated issue addresses. But I have to thank you for taking
Mhm.
the time to share your time with us. And just one more time, let us know what your full title was before you retired.
It was Deputy Commissioner, Office of Emergency Intervention Services, which included domestic violence and a range of other programs that are really designed to meet the needs of folks in crisis. So it was a lot, but very impactful work.
And just so incredibly important. Thank you again for joining us today on this edition of Mesh.
Thank you for the opportunity, Pamela.
And folks, for those of you who are listening, I'm going to ask you to be sure that you like, share, subscribe to Mesh. I am here every week with a conversation just as powerful and just as informative as the one that you've just heard. Thank you so much for joining me today on this edition of Mesh. Hopefully, I will see you next week.